Alright, so in this video we are actually going to install CentOS version 8 to our VirtualBox, and we'll have a live server at the end of this video. So first, go ahead and open up VirtualBox application. Click on New to create a new virtual machine. For the name of this machine, I'm going to call it CentOS version 8. You can also call it a test server, a dev server, or anything that you personally like. For everything else, we're going to leave this as default and simply click on Next. For the memory size, the recommendation is 1024 MB for this VM. We can add more memory to it, or we can actually drop the number down. We're going to go with the default for now, which is 1024. If we want to change, add, or remove memory from this VM, and we can always do that later on in this video, even after the server has been built. For now, 1024 is fine. Let's go ahead and click Next. We are going to create a new hard disk for this VM that we will use to install the ISO on. Let's click on Create a new virtual hard disk now and click Create. There are three types of storage types that VirtualBox supports. We can go with VDI, which is a VirtualBox disk image, and click on Next. There are two different types of storages that we could map to this VM. We can either go with the dynamically allocated storage. What that means is that this VM will create a 8 GB or 10 GB block on your hard disk, but it's only going to use the space that the VM actually needs to run successfully. If it does not need, let's say if it only uses 4 GB, the VM is not going to use more than 4 GB of that disk space. Let's say an application on your computer needs more disk space. This VM will release the remaining disk space to the other application. But if you were to go with a fixed size is going to create a dedicated storage block on your hard disk. Now, let's say if we chose 10 GB for the hard disk, this is not going to release that storage to any other application on your machine. This will strictly leave that 8 GB or 10 GB space for this VM only. So what I would recommend you do is create on dynamically allocated storage and click Next. The default recommended size is only 8 GB, but I will bump this up a little. Let's go with 10 GB in size for the hard disk and click on Create. Now it has created the VM, but before we actually install the OS to this VM, we still have to do a few more tweaks, and we can do that by clicking on the settings button here. Okay, under the General tab, if you want to change the name of your VM, you could do that here. We're going to go to Systems, and here if you wanted to increase the memory size, before we selected 1 GB, let's move this up to 2 GB. Under the Processor tab, currently it has 1 CPU assigned. Let's give it 1 more CPU and bump it up to 2 total. Now let's click on Storage. For storage, we already have a CentOS version 8 disk created, which is a 10 GB disk that we created. We actually need to mount this ISO image to the VM that we are trying to build. So click on this empty CD and click on the DVD with the drop down arrow. Click on Choose a disk file. Now you will try to find where the ISO image is located. I saved mine on my desktop. I'll click on Desktop and select the image that I need to mount. Click Open to mount the DVD. For the network, you would scroll to the Network tab, and this VM only needs one adapter, but we need to change the network type or the adapter type from NAT to a bridged adapter. The bridged adapter would allow this VM to reach the outside world. Let's say if you want to ping Google or Yahoo.com, this connection here, the bridged adapter, will allow that connection. If you do not make this setting, if you leave this as NAT only, this will not allow this VM to reach outside of your VM. So I highly recommend that you change it to bridge adapter and click OK to save your settings. Alright, now let's click on Start to power on the VM for the first time. And this will open up a console session to the server. When you get to the Startup Disk menu, you're going to click on this drop-down arrow and select the ISO image that we mounted earlier to this VM and click on Start. You can go ahead and click on X to close this message. And to make the console window a little larger, you have to click on View, Virtual Screen, and I will scale it to 200%. This will make the console window a bit larger and easier to read. Now if you notice that the automatic boot will start in about 30 seconds, you can click on the console window and press the up or down arrow key. This will disable that clock. Now when you're ready to boot, press the up arrow and select Install CentOS Linux 8 and hit Enter. This will start booting the server using the DVD image that we mounted. You can also close any of these informational messages that pop up. Here we will select English as the default language that we'll use during the installation process. Click Continue to go to the next screen. Okay, so the first thing that we need to change is the software selection. So we are now going to build a server with a GUI, or in other words, a graphical user interface. So let's click on software selection and change it to server. There are other options that we can select too, but for our exercise, we're just going to build a basic server. Once you have this selected, click on Done to continue. Now we are going to select the installation destination. So click on this, and we will select the 10 GB hard disk that we created earlier in the process. So select the hard disk that you want to use and click on Done. So the last thing that we need to do is select the network for this server. So click on Network and Hostname. We already mapped a network adapter to the server. All we need to do here is simply turn it on. So click on this button here. Now the network has been connected. You could see the speed is 1000 megabytes per second and the server has been assigned an IP address. Please do make a note of this IP address. We're going to need this later on in the course. We will leave the host name as localhost for now and click on Done to go back to the old screen. Here you could also change the time zone to your local city. I'm going to leave this as default at New York and simply click on Begin Installation to start the installation process. Meanwhile, we can set the root password for this operating system or OS, and we can also create a local user if you want to. So let's start off by creating the root password that we are going to need to log into this server. Click on root password, and you can set the password to anything that you like. Once you're done setting the password, click on Done to go back to the previous screen. We are going to create a new local user. It is not required. You can do that if you like. Once you're done creating the local user, click on Done to go back to the previous screen. So the system is now going to install a bunch of RPMs, about 596 to be exact. This can be a lengthy process and it will take about 20 to 25 minutes to complete. So I'm going to skip the video towards the end, and once the system is done, we'll have to reboot. Alright, so the installation is now complete. We can go ahead and reboot the machine, and this will boot the server up for the first time. Let's go ahead and click on Reboot. Okay, so it looks like we'll have to unmount the DVD first that we used to install the CentOS server. So click on Devices and select Optical Drives and click on Remove Disk from Virtual Drive. Click on First Unmount. Now click on Machine and select Reset. And select Reset again. Okay, now the server is up and we are at the login prompt. The default user ID will be root, R-O-O-T. Type that in and hit enter. Now it's going to ask you for the password that we created during the installation process. Go ahead and enter that in and hit enter. This will log you into the server. You can run uptime to see how long the server has been up. Right now it's only been up for a minute. And that's it for this video. Now you know how to install and build a CentOS version 8 box. In the next video, we'll download PuTTY to access the server remotely with SSH connection. Thank you for stopping by. I'll see you in the next video.